All right. All's set up and recording now. So yeah, Gary, first of all, like I said, thanks for making some time to chat and catch up with me and Randy. And coming off of a race weekend, I what's what's kind of in the modern era now, still hosting so many events at G&J. I saw you guys painted the curbs before the CK&A race, right?
Yeah.
Last
Yes, we did.
weekend, put some lipstick on it, made it look all pretty. And what's kind of like uh, what does your day look like, nowadays here in 2025 when you have a race event roll into G&J Kartway?
Well, we start out early in the morning, about 7 o'clock on the gate, and my wife is on there, and Vicky Ash from down the road helps her, and then tech inspections start about 7:30, and Linda starts, I think, signing in about 7:30 also, and then they have 2 rounds of practice, and then they qualify, and we race.
And then
That's on our local club races.
about how late are you at the track for, say, a normal club race before you're able, after getting there at 7 a.m.?
Usually 5:30 or 6, we're winding up, depending on yellow flags and red flags.
Yeah, well, I mean, on track, obviously, but for you, once everyone kind of rolls on out, or do you have people as well to make the days not, unbearably long, I guess?
Well, usually we don't, yeah, we don't clean up till the next day. So yeah, that works pretty good.
Yeah, finding the balance. Randy, I'll kind of pass it over to you. Obviously, G&J Kartway is a track that, as you mentioned, and you and I were catching up right before we started, right? That has played such a big role in American karting's, in really entire run, right?
Yeah, most definitely. And I've known Gary. Gosh, we go back, Gary, to the early '60s, I think, when we first met. And one thing I was thinking about yesterday when I was thinking about the podcast is, we had a track in Port Washington, Ohio, Cougar Raceway, that my mom and dad built, and I ran that track the first couple of years of karting and never went anywhere. And I'm not so sure that the very first track I didn't race after our own track in Port Washington was
Oh, hold
Camden.
on, Gary, is Randy frozen for you too?
He's frozen for me. Yes, he is.
Oh
Randy,
wow.
can you check the cord on your webcam? Maybe just unplug it and replug it real quick. Gary, to Randy's credit, this is actually this is podcast number 5. This is the first time he's had any hiccup of any kind since I sent him all the gear. He's been so good about his headset, his mixer, the extra webcam I sent, everything. So I don't know, maybe I jinxed that here this morning or
Well,
something.
now I've lost it.
It so it's
You're killing me, Xander.
I know. Well, you were so good, and then I hit recording,
Yeah.
and then it's like everything just got all nervous on us. So at the bottom, Randy, where it's got like the microphone icon, and then like kind of the movie style camera icon, there's the little down arrow or up arrow next to each of those items, and then on the camera, you're looking for the Elgato Facecam Pro. Once you click on the little down arrow to make sure that's the one that's selected, once the cord's back in and everything. And it may just work if you just also refresh and join back in.
All right, let me try to do that. Sorry, guys.
No, you're good. But that makes it at least easy, Gary. I think the easiest way to kind of start is, I want to hear the story of how how did you first discover karting and then go, you know what? I want to go all in and I want to have a racetrack.
Well, it started out in 1958. A young man from Dayton, Ohio, came out to see his. Well, he stayed, the summer, a couple weeks. He was my age. Down the road, we called her Grandma Flory, and his father bought him a go kart. So the first thing that happened, he drove flying down the road to his grandfather's farm, which was across the road from us, and they had a blacktop driveway. So he drove his go kart down the road, no helmets. We didn't have helmets back then. We didn't use them, and he went around the oval. And so I was 10 years old. I had to have a go kart too. So we were farmers, and my dad had a dairy, and I had some cow or calves, and I sold my calf to the neighbor down the road, which was a dairy. His name was Chelsea Rotifer. I sold it for $250. It was a Holstein heifer, and I bought a Zoom Along go-kart from Rotefeld Eaton Company in Eaton, Ohio for $189. It had a little Clinton A490 on it. You pull it with a recoil starter. He had the same type of go-kart. I don't know what type he had, but it had a Clinton A490 on it. And everybody rode the go-karts, on Saturday and Sunday around the oval driveway, which is catty corner from the G&J Kartway right now. And we all had fun. And then when the wheat crop was harvested, we made a little dirt track out, which is basically east of the existing G&J Kartway now. But of course, the next year they had to put corn in that field, and that track was done. We had a plowed under. They used plows back then. They don't now anymore. But anyway, where the track sets was a little woods, and Dad said we could clean the woods out and make a track there, and that's where we made the original 1/7 of a mile dirt track. And we raced in dirt, for a couple of years. Then in 1962, we blacktopped it and started having races in 1962. That was the start of the G&J Kartway.
And so is it still the same kind of oval configuration that still exists between all the different layouts at G&J, right? Like, isn't it like at turn 1 and kind of the last turn? Was that the layout of the dirt track, and then you just blacktopped over it and then added the road course as time went on, or was it in a totally different place?
No, the tracks are all connected. We raced on the 1/7 of a mile. It's kind of like your goggles. It had a little turn back on the backside, basically an oval with a turn inside on the backside. Then in 1964, we extended it to a 1/4 mile track. And then in excuse me, 1968, we put the Monza in and made a 1/2 mile go-kart track. The Monza was, we copied the Monza at the Dart Kart Speedway in Mansfield. Excuse me.
No, yeah, and
let me just tell you,
yeah,
Xander, I raced on that Monza in several times, but at the Nationals in '69 and '71. Well, buddy, we had a Monza at our track. I think it was 30-degree banking, and I want to say, Gary, yours was like 36. It was steeper than ours.
It was about 36 to 40. You're right.
Yeah, and you just got in there and hung on, man. It was a real test of courage, let me tell you. But it made that track so unique, and people loved it.
Yeah, it was so funny. When you went into the track, if you're on the high side and up to speed, you could feel your cheeks drop from the gravity, and you could feel your shoulders drop. And the next day, your shoulders did hurt until you got used to it.
Well, and it was, I know with our Monza, and I believe with yours, although yours might have been a little tighter radius, I can't remember, but if you had the guts, and not too many people did, to go in on the high side and somebody went in low, the radius was so tight on the low side that it would bind them up a little bit. And if you could keep your foot in it around the high side and hang on, you could make the pass on the high side. Not too many people could do it, but those that could, that was a big advantage.
Yes, and many of them, they learned how to do it eventually. But yeah, if you stayed on the high side, you would be ahead by about 4 kart lengths coming into the next
right.
turn.
The momentum you carried and the RPM you carried on that high side, because you loosened up the radius a little bit, just kicked you out of there at a high speed. I assume I'm not frozen anymore.
No, yeah, now you're all good.
Okay, all right, good.
You're sorted.
All right, okay. But yeah, that track, and I know you guys were talking about the history of it, and that's a lot of information. Honestly, I didn't know, because when I first raced at the track was pre-Monza, but that kink you talked about on the back, where you go down the front stretch, and I think you're about 250 to 300 down the front stretch, and then you've got a 180, but the 180 is actually like a 270, because you turn and you turn and you turn, and all of a sudden you're coming back the way you came, and then you got a sharp right-hander, and not everybody comes out of that the way they should, and they can lose some time pretty quick.
that turn has a declining radius, and not a lot of drivers do it right. And they some of them copy the other people. And the Cassidy boys did it great years ago when they raced here, and Ryan Cassidy still wins here.
Yeah. So, and basically, the common thing would be to hit the corner on the high side, apex, and then come out. But if you do that, you're way out of shape for the right-hander because it's right there. It happens. So you almost got to take a late apex, come in, and then drift out for the next corner. And it's so different for a lot of drivers that haven't been used to that it really causes them trouble, and they have trouble getting used to it. It's real challenging.
That is true. Very true.
Yeah. So what you took the Monza down? When did the Monza get taken down?
We took the Monza down in 1973
and why
for
did
two
you?
reasons.
Okay.
We had a couple guys or carters. They broke their collarbones, and then their shoulder, and then two, the Monza was so tight, the frames of the go-kart dug into the blacktop, and we had to we had to blacktop that about every 2 or 3 years, and that was getting very expensive. So everybody said, well, let's just take the Monza down. We took the Monza down and made a big turn 3. And of course, they all said to come back and say, "Oh, why did we do that? We should not have done that." But it was too late.
It's like the same thing we have modern day at Newcastle with some of the different layouts that the national guys have been running, because they'll run the big hill or ski jump as they call it, and then when they land, because it's such a sharp down jump in it, and you're coming off of Newcastle's little triangle oval that they used to host the asphalt oval races on. That it would squash the frames and kind of banana them with the modern kart frames even. And we haven't run it since I think the last year we ran it, I was still racing, which was 2019. Of course, now that we don't touch the layout because everybody doesn't want to tear their stuff up, and I'm sure that it's a little bit easier for SCUSA to manage a 1.1 mile track than a 1.3 mile track. Same exact scenario, Gary. Everyone's like, "Oh, why don't we run that layout again? That was so much fun. We missed that, But yeah, I'm sure they don't miss having to buy a new go-kart right after, or at least in that case, compared to what it sounds like with the Monza, that didn't hurt the track any bit. Where for you guys having a blacktop every 2 to 3 years, I have to imagine that's doubly hard being up in a region that gets snow over the winter too.
Very true. Yes.
So Xander, when we get into the early 70s, we have to discuss.
Yeah, we have to discuss the plaque, yeah. Right? The big moment that was the big split, right, where WK was formed, right?
So Gary, I don't know if I've ever honestly heard your recollection of what happened, but it was in 71. And it was like the perfect storm. Everything just fell into place, and enough people had the energy to try something new, and it happened. So what do you remember about that weekend?
Well, I remember in 1971, we had approximately 700 go-karts from 44 states in Canada. We had one gentleman from Hong Kong. His name was Albert Poon. And what happened, the tech guys threw about 5 or 6 karters out, disqualified them because they had illegal McCulloch engines. And what really happened, IKF stepped in and reinstated those karters, and they got their trophies as if they were, legal 100%. And that evening, right after that happened, your dad was one of them, Ronnie Withrow, several other the local go-karters around the telephone pole with straw bales around him. And that was the start of WK right there in 1971 after the race.
So does here's my question. So they have their meeting around the telephone pole, right? George Kugler, Withrow, the about 6 about 6 or 8 or so people, right? Small posse, but you have 700 go-karts in the event, right? I mean, well, the one thing that I'm sure has been the same throughout racing's history is that rumors and words and talk travels through the paddock quicker than any other Gossip Girl or esque TV show. So how quickly was that night like word traveling about something going on or murmurs going on? Do you remember anything like that? Or like, did you get a lot of phone calls the next week as all this, or did this kind of group keep everything somehow under wraps until the announcement came?
Well, they kind of kept it under wraps. I guess WK started in Dayton, Ohio. They had an office there for a while. And then maybe in a year or two, they moved it up to Akron, Ohio.
Actually, it moved to Toledo because Jim Vale was the executive director. Right. So it moved to Toledo. Then Jim passed, and then it moved to Akron. Yeah.
Right. Yes. But George Kugler, Randy's father, Ronnie Withrow, Chet Williams, several of the OVK go-karters were very instrumental in getting WK off the ground.
And Bob Sellers, which had a couple of sons, had 3 sons, didn't he? Brian, Doug, and Ron, right?
Yes.
And I raced with the 2 older ones. Bob had a business, a very successful business in Dayton, and he was one of them that had the passion and the energy to say, we got to do something. He went to my dad and he said, I've got an office for you, rent-free. You set it up. Ron Withrow was actually the first president. It wasn't my dad. It was Ron Withrow. They set up in Bob Sellers' business. And for the first year or two, Gary, they ran out of there, and Bob said, it's all yours, man. Let's just get this thing going. And there's so many stories about people that they were ready. They were ready for something. And what I always say to people is the perception was that IKF didn't care. I don't know if that was true, but that was the perception, and they didn't do anything, or at least they didn't do anything successfully to get rid of that perception, and it finally came to a head. But so many people rallied and said, yeah, you got this, we'll do that. Here's some money if you need it. It was amazing, and obviously the rest is history. WK grew by leaps and bounds almost immediately.
That is very true. We had a race scheduled with IKF in 1972. I think it was in June of 1972. And we had about 3 or 4 go-karters come to that race. Everybody else, they did not come. And then, in fact, WK scheduled a race on top of that date.
No.
And they won. They won because they had a nice crowd at their track. And,
I don't know
where that was, but that was in June of 1972.
Probably Port Washington.
I think you're right.
Probably Cougar Raceway.
You're right.
What was going through your?
Here, we lost you.
Yeah. My mic disconnected there for a sec.
See, you're good.
Even I have some issues with it. But Gary, what was your perspective on all of this and that kind of era from, did you know at that IKF race in 1971, what was happening? When did you kind of catch wind, and what were your thoughts on that era in the early 70s as a track owner, as, the host of an event that ultimately was the first like big split, right, in karting history?
Well, yes, you're right. We hosted, and we had about 650 go-karts in 1969. And then we hosted even a little bit larger event in 1971. And we were with IKF. And then WKA starts, and, we just hosted one of the biggest events around. And then we're the bad guys now because we were with IKF. And so WK hosted several races around us, and they didn't host anything, soon. But as the track proved that, it was a good track, they did come back. And I think we had the national WKA nationals in 1988.
Yeah, we had some big events through the Manufacturers Cup days at your track. One of the stories, Xander, and I'll let Gary tell it, but I just want to set the stage here. Would you believe that we had a race in the summer at Camden, a Manufacturers Cup race, which steadily drew, Gary, 400, 500 entries. And it was always a big event. And Gary had just laid down new asphalt, and the track was like glass, except it was about 95 degrees and humid. And the track kept coming up, and we couldn't get it cooled down. So, Gary, I'll let you take it, but let's just say for the first time in history, we watered an asphalt track.
That's very true. And I think, I'm not so sure, I think about 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, we were down there with jackhammers, cutting the blacktop, and then we put some, concrete in so we could race the next afternoon. And we got it in. It was tight, but we got it in. And we had
And
a lot of go-karters helping us too.
And Gary had a water truck, and I went to him. I said, Gary, I don't know. This is crazy, but the track is so hot. What if we threw some water on it to cool it down? Would it help? And I think it bought us the rest of the day. And then you made the proper changes, which we're going to get into about being a track owner. But to me, you're the epitome of what it takes as a track owner to work with a club and get where you need to be, get accomplished what you need to accomplish. And that's a prime example. Okay, what do we need to do? And everybody flocked to Gary and said, we're here to help you. Let's do it,
That's very true.
Man. So cutting up, putting in. So when you say putting in concrete, are you kind of putting in patches? Are you cutting slits in and then just kind of trying to go more so deeper so the underlying layers of asphalt are holding? Or are you like, because we'll have a lot of tracks do that with Rhino liner now, do the patchwork and whatnot. But was that a part of the equation back then, or was it no, we're going to cut chunks out, put concrete patches in at the apex or whatnot where it's coming up? Like, yeah, I want to hear all about this. This is crazy.
Well, we used a jackhammer, and we cut down blacktop about 4 inches deep, and then we had the form there because it was where we shoveled out the blacktop, and then about 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, we had the Camden Ready Mix people out here, and they filled it up full of concrete. We leveled it down, and by noon the next day, we were able to run on it. Yeah, we had that. Yeah, we did that several times. Now we have a new product. I call it a epoxy cement. When the track starts tearing up, we put it about an eighth to a quarter inch of that down, and that seems to work great. It's hard, and we patched some before the CKNA race came this weekend, and they did not even mar the track. I mean, the epoxy cement is very hard, and it fills all the little cracks and the crevices where the blacktop you start tearing up.
And one of the things we have to realize is, and we have to step back a little bit in time, but there was a period of time that Gary and I raced through this period where tires were hard as a rock and asphalt wasn't really an issue. And all of a sudden we get these soft tires and they're biting, and they're not sliding. They're biting and they're tearing up the track. And all of a sudden track owners have a new problem. And that is the track's coming up. We got to fix it because these tires are just so abrasive to the track. So it really, I think kind of changed the way tracks have to look at maintenance. Yeah. Basically, it's a whole new issue.
It's even the same, it's the same conversation, even now, right? Again, what you did before your race this weekend, Gary, and obviously not too far down the road from you, RK, the Quaker City Motorsports Park. They had the Stars Series coming for their maiden year of being open with a go-kart track. They held 2 club races. After the second club race, asphalt was coming up, had a Rhino liner, a ton of it, and even still, just the way that the ground had started to shift kind of underneath the asphalt had made the asphalt even uneven, and they were still trying to grind it down and do Rhino liner. But Randy's brought up a couple of those. Oh my gosh, the stress level and length of days becomes a whole lot longer as a track owner that you've been a part of, or just unpredictable things. But Gary, what's if I ask you, what was just a crazy race weekend story as a track owner? What's another story, or is there another story that comes to mind that maybe Randy hasn't brought up, or maybe even he might not think of?
Well, we've had all kinds of stories. We've had many big names in the NASCAR and also IndyCar that have started up at the G&J Kartway. Tony Stewart raced here when he's 6 years old. He raced till we practiced a lot in the summer times because he wanted to keep sharp, and he was running the street races. And then when he got into a sprint car, we never really saw him, anymore, because then he went on to Indy. Danica Patrick raced here. She was the one that said, if you can win at the G&J, you can win anywhere, because our track is a very technical track to drive. And Ernie Irvin's raced here. Scott Pruitt raced here when he was like 9 or 10 years old in 1969. He qualified up front. On the very first corner, he wrecked, flipped his go-kart. And Scott was from St. Louis. He had a Margay cart. The St. Louis Dispatch was here taking pictures because of him. And he and his dad, they were picking the go-kart up. Scott was like, 9 or 10 years old, bawling his eyes out. And the St. Louis Dispatch had that on the front page the next day.
Oh my gosh.
Well, Gary, we got to talk about the non-racer that was so famous that came to your track.
That is true. You're talking about Tom Cruise. They were filming Rain Man in Cincinnati, Ohio, along with Dustin Hoffman. And there was a driving school out of Columbus. He had about, he'd bring about 10 or 12 people down. He'd charge them, probably $100 or so. And they would practice and gave a driving school. Well, he called me about Thursday, the week before. It was a non-scheduled event, really. And he wanted to know if the track was open. I said yes. And he said that the crew or the cast from the Cincinnati area that was filming Rain Man needed something to do. So they brought the entire cast up here as Tom Cruise. Dustin Hoffman did not come. Tom's wife came, and about there was probably 15 to 20 people, and they all took the driving school. And Tom talked to everybody, very friendly, and signed autographs and signed pictures. And by the end of the day, we had about 50 or 60 people here because news traveled fast. They asked us not to tell anything, but when people were here early that morning, the word got out.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. We actually, I don't know if you provided the photos, but I remember it was covered in the WK magazine. Everybody's like, "Oh my gosh, man, I wish I had been there." But that's a pretty awesome.
Yes, that was true.
And another thing that I think is pretty fascinating, and it kind of went full circle, is your son Travis. Well, first, let's go back. You had two sons racing, Travis and Jason, right?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. So Travis, and they were both very successful, not just at Camden, but everywhere they traveled. But Travis decided to pursue racing at the next level, and I'll let Gary kind of tell that story. But Travis really had a lot of success all the way up through Indy Lights.
Yes. Well, the kids both ran shifter carts, and then they ran sprint cars, and they both won one or two. I think they both won 2 or 3 races at the sprint car level. And then we talked to Sam Smith, and we got Travis a test ride. He went to Las Vegas in a Indy Light car. That was in 2003 or 4. And I guess on the second or third lap, Travis was flat on the track. He didn't, all the gas and on the throttle. So then they come back and said, well, hey, we could run him. But, you got to fund these things. So it took about a year or so. But he did take another tryout down at Kentucky Speedway. And his first race was down at Kentucky Speedway. And he qualified on pole position and led 55 laps of that race, of a 60-lap race. Ended up getting, I think, 5th overall because a car got under him and he didn't want to crash. And, of course, he let off the gas and then the momentum went away and he got back to 5th. But I do remember that. And then the next year he was able to run, and he qualified on pole, I think, 3 or 4 times and won about 3 races across the country.
Yeah, he was a great talent still, which brings me to kind of a segue into when I said it went full circle. Tell us about what happened a month ago when Travis came back and got behind the wheel.
Well, he came back, and a gentleman who ran like 5th or 6th, in the master's class, asked Travis if he wanted to drive the kart. And of course, Travis, being a racer, he said sure, and he hopped on it. And he went out about 5 laps of practice. Qualified on outside pole, and then he won the feature event. And that was kind of neat because Travis hadn't been in a kart for probably 20 years.
20 years. Yeah. Muscle memory, right?
Yeah,
Right.
you had to bite. Man, that's
Yeah.
what's. I mean, I want to go back to the Indy Lights era really quickly because that 2003, 2004, right? That's still when Indy Lights. At that time, I think they had started out at some road courses, right? But they were still predominantly ovals. If it's that era, was I mean that's an era still of open wheel racing. Obviously maybe slightly safer than the 80s and the 90s and the 70s. But as a father, were there any concerns for you about Travis? Wanting to go up that ladder and knowing how fast and wild open wheel cars on ovals are at that time.
Well, yeah, we were very, very concerned, and Sam Smith, they provided a safe car for him, and he did hit the wall a couple times. Nothing real bad, but yeah, and then he did. Next week he qualify on pole. That was kind of kept you going a little bit.
And he's doing a driving school now at the track now. Is that right?
Well, he had all the sportsman carts come out Saturday morning of that race,
Oh, okay.
and he
All
showed
right.
him the lines, and it was kind of neat because several of the sportsmen that he was showing, they were in the top 5 the next day. That kind of proved right that he, they learned a lot.
And Xander, to circle back a little bit, which we're going to talk about here in a little while, the OVK, Ohio Valley Karting Association, which has been partnered with the Gregg family really since the track's inception almost. Is that right, Gary?
See, 1964 is when OVK started at Ronnie Withrow's house in Dayton, Ohio.
Okay.
It was either in the fall of or the winter of 1963 or the spring of 1964 is when it started. Yes. And Ronnie's main concern was he wanted to keep the weights and the rules because there were like 7 tracks in the area to be the same where you could go to any track and race rather than have to, change weight or change your cart around or change engines. And he was very successful in that. And OVK has continued on to, through all those years through today.
Wait, so hold on. You're an IKF track in 1971. The WK meeting and formation happens right at the IKF race, and Ronnie Withrow's the first president of WK, right, Randy? But he was also instrumental in the start of OVK. So did OVKA stay as an IKF club while he's WK president for that first kind of weird blended year? What I'm following this and go. I mean, this is as if someone was like a Democrat and a Republican at the same time for like 2 or 3 years.
It's a tangled web.
Most of the OVK members did follow the WK races. Yes. And my kids raced in WK right away too, but we were a little bit on the back burner because in 1971 we were one of those big IKF tracks, and they eventually came around, and the track proved to be good, and they all came back.
So being an IKF track with OVK as the club, so OVK wasn't dictating which sanctioning body the track adhered to. Is that right?
No, they didn't really tell us what you should run or not. But when in 1972, when we only ended up with like 4 carts for a divisional, IKF really kind of pulled out, and they about the farthest they came anymore east was St. Louis, in St. Louis, Missouri, at the Quincy Speedway there, the go-kart track.
I see.
And one of the things that I've always admired about the OVKA, the Gregg family, and the G&J Kartway is, I've observed the last several years, and you have to look at geography, but Camden, Xander, I don't know if you've ever been to Camden, but it lies, I guess it would be northwest a little bit of Cincinnati, Gary?
We're straight north.
Yeah.
Yeah, I tell everybody we're just 15 miles from the crossroads of the nation because we are 15 miles south of Route 70 and 15 miles west of Route 75. And of course, 70 and 75 cross in Dayton, Ohio.
Right.
And, a lot of the population is, in the area, in the tri-state area.
So back, and I think it's been like almost 20 years now that Newcastle was built. And I'll tell you, Gary, when I heard Mark was building Newcastle, and what a fantastic job they've done out there, and I admire them for their hard work, and Mike Adams and all that. But you're 45 minutes east of Newcastle, and my first thought was, oh man, that's really going to hurt Camden. Camden never missed a beat. They never their entries, they were, if they dropped, it was minimal. Okay, all right, well that's good, because what happened was, which is how karting should be, Mark Dismore builds a racetrack and they build an infrastructure, a new karter base, right? So then Cincinnati builds a new track, or at least opens up a new track that was already there, and they put some improvements to it. I'm thinking, oh, here we go again. With Camden, haven't missed a beat. Gary, I've seen some of the pictures on Facebook of your club races. You're getting 100 plus at every club race.
Yes, usually we get 100 to 120 carts, and go-karting to me is very family oriented, and mother comes, the sisters come, and it's a very family run sport, and that's what OVK, I think OVK is better than that than anyone else.
It's hard to argue. I mean, so you said they were formed in 64?
Yes.
So what, Xander, that's 60 years OVK's been a club.
Yeah. No, that's incredible, right?
Yeah.
For you as a track owner, Gary, right? I think this kind of segues a bit into where we also wanted to go, Randy, is, you've gotten to see so much of how this sport's changed, and you've also obviously been a karter yourself, but also a karting dad. How have you managed it, and where do you what I mean, if you were to kind of describe the evolution of what you've witnessed since the 1960s through the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s, now you're still, again, like we were just talking at the beginning of this, hot off of hosting a CKNA regional race just yesterday or just last weekend. So
right.
So what, how do you kind of describe the evolution of the sport, and how do you make of all of it?
Well, go-karting, I would say, gives you the biggest bang for your buck, because if you go into sprint cars, they cost a lot. Indy cars are outrageous, of course. And I had a thing happen a couple weeks ago. It's so funny. The gentleman, his little boy knocked out the first place runner, and they disqualified that gentleman. So, the father, took it in stride, and he was here. They went next week. Well, the first thing that happened, he was on the track, his son was, and somebody hit the rear of his cart and broke the axle. Well, the little boy that the family that he knocked out the week before hustled in and helped on that go-kart. They got an axle for my son, Travis, and they got that little McBride boy, it was his last name, got him running again. And that's what I said. It's go-kart is very family orientated. And, everybody helps everybody at the OBK races. Now, that I've heard that's not always the case, but we promote that, and we enjoy that.
And one of the things that fascinates me the most about that facility, 60 years, Xander, a track owner and a club have coexisted. And Gary, I know there's been times you haven't agreed, but you always find common ground. You're supportive. And that's when Xander and I started this podcast. One of the things I wanted to do is to talk to the Gary Greggs, and there's not too many of them, but the Gary Greggs, to share some of the things you've been able to do to maintain that partnership. Because even though you're the common denominator for track ownership through the years, the club goes through different boards and different presidents and so on, but yet at the end of the day, you all end up at the same place, reaching your goal. What's the secret formula for that?
Well, we try to be fair to everyone. Sometimes it's hard when a go-karter gets disqualified. We try to have a good tech on the engines, a good tech on the carts. And we do promote safety, because if somebody gets hurt, that's not good on the track. And, sometimes they get hurt and they don't race anymore. So OVK has been very, good at, keeping the carts safe, good tech on the engines, and we try to be fair. We have some very good race directors, and they try to make the rules the same for everybody, and that's what we try to do.
With kind of Randy's question, right? Like, he's right. There's not a lot of track owners that are in your shoes, in 2025 that are okay. Yeah, we're gonna have a club and member run organization be the one that hosts my local races. Did the thought ever cross your mind at any point? I feel like for 60 years there had to have been some day where you're like, gosh, I'm tired of dealing with this year's board. I'm just gonna do my own club races hosted by the track. And did that ever cross your mind? Did you go, that's, what, I don't want to do that? What was, there had to have been a frustration point at some point in 60 years.
Well, we've had several little private meetings from time to time, but nothing major.
And then too, I have had people come up and say, hey, I want to rent the track and we're going to host another club. And I never did entertain that thought to go that way. Yes, but yeah, OVK is very good to work with. Some of the club members, raced when I raced years ago.
Yeah.
And, and the goal is to keep karting in the area and to keep it, affordable so that, the young kids can race. I mean, we have, like 15 or 16 sportsmen racing every weekend. And those kids grow up and, they're going to have families, just like the Overbecks. Matt Overbeck raced here probably 30 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And now his son, James Overbeck, he runs up front almost every race he runs in all across the country.
Yeah.
And there's been several families that have done that.
Yeah. His, and James's sister, even though she tried kid karts, she actually was working with us on the broadcast team pretty much most of this summer, as well as something else to do at the racetrack while James has been on track, and the whole family has been traveling. So yeah, they're a great group, but never a thought or never interest of, what, forget the OVK, forget everything else, I'm doing the Gregg Club Series. Never.
No, we never entertained that. When we first started in the 60s, our first race was in 1962, and I was about 14 years old then.
Mm-hmm.
I was on the front gate, and
Okay.
you never guess what we charged admission on the in 1962. It was 50 cents a person. Kids under 12 were free.
50 cents. So people, so you're just up there with just a big jar of what, quarters like this?
Yes.
Filled up. Here you go, everybody. No digital wireless credit card readers
Right.
back in 1962. So
Right.
you're just bringing a whole laundry bag of quarters and nickels and dimes back to mom and dad.
Well, it used to be at our concession stand. This is unreal. You could get a hot dog and a pop for a quarter.
So I'm so glad you brought up the concession stand, because that's something I want to talk about. And I always tell people, for a true traditional concession stand, I've been to a lot of racetracks, and this is not being disrespectful to any of them, it doesn't get any better than G&J. And I'm going to pose this question to you, Gary, and I think your response is really not just to me and Xander, but to any track owner / club that listens to this podcast. How important is it to have a good concession stand and clean restrooms?
Well, we've tried, and we do have showers in the restrooms. We have 2 showers for the men and then a single shower for the ladies. And my mother, years ago, in the 60s, ran the concession stand. And then when she kind of retired and passed on, my wife, Elaine, ran the concession stand. And she ran the stand for roughly 20 some years. And now my daughter, Shelly, has been running the stand for the last probably 15 or 20 years. And her daughter, Maddie, helps her in the stand. And we just, we provide healthy food. I think we're noted for our quarter-pound hamburgers. Shelly fries them on a cast iron grill, and that gives them a little special taste. And Shelly doesn't buy anything that is got, anything in the meat. She buys it from a meat market,
over in the Miamisburg area, and it's all 100% beef.
Well, and it's all, family made with love, right? That extra little in-house touch.
You're
Xander,
right. You're right.
You ever get to Camden, you got to have a cheeseburger. It is amazing. But I think taking that information now, if I owned a track, and Xander and I have been to a lot of race kart tracks, as you have, Gary, but you go there and one, if they have a restroom, it's not cleaned. If they don't have a restroom, it's a porta-john. And sometimes they have a concession stand. Sometimes they have a food truck. Sometimes they don't have anything. I mean, to me, that's critical if you want people to come back and bring a friend the next time they come.
Well, that's part of the we promote the family aspect of it. Sometimes I help on the front gate, and you have a son and a father there. The mother is there coming too, along with two sisters, and of course the sisters see the other sisters, and they that's why we promote the family aspect of OVK racing.
Yeah, and obviously it works well. I mean, you've had a lot of success doing it, and it's clear that works. I really enjoy it. One of the things too, I don't want to get off on a tangent here, but we've shared stories about when you used to come to our track, and it's important to me because there's not too many people alive anymore that knew my mom and dad, but you came to our track when they were running the track, and not that many people around have been to our track when we had it, so it's so cool today that we get to talk, because going down memory lane with some of this stuff is pretty awesome.
Yes, I remember racing at your track in the 70s, and then my son raced at your track in the 80s, I believe. See, the best I ever got at your track was second, but the first time Jason was there, he won first.
What are some? Go ahead, Randy.
No, it's okay. Go ahead.
What's here, Randy? You got this one. We got your webcam working and everything. You got it. All
right. I was going to tell a story that happened to me at Camden that was a lesson learned, and it was back in the USA 20 days, and I think it was Jason and Kevin Nelson racing USA 20, and Jason, that was his home track, and he was solid, and Kevin was good wherever he went. And so down the long straightaway, Kevin was trying to get around Jason, and it was marginal whether he was blocking or not. We didn't call it. Okay. So Kevin comes off the track. And by the way, Kevin and I are great friends. Okay. So Kevin comes off the track, and he's all hot, and he comes up to me and he's screaming and hollering. He says, "You tell me what you saw." Now, I didn't know Kevin at the time. So I said, "Well, what I saw was down the front straightaway, Jason took his line, then came over and stayed there. That's one move. I don't think, he really was blocking you, more than just once." He said, "What's my name?" I didn't know his name. He said, "My point exactly." And even though in my heart I knew we weren't favoring Jason, he walked away from me saying, "Hey, you know what? They favor Jason because he knows Jason. He doesn't know me." And from that day forward, I never called a driver by their name when I was an official. So lesson learned, Xander. You can. I'll give it to you now, but I wanted to tell that story because to me, as a race official, that's extremely important. Unless you know everybody's name, don't say anybody's name.
Yeah. No, that was made clear to me pretty early on too, because, well, sometimes the officials now, when I would be working for traveling series events, they wouldn't know everybody's name, and that was by design. They would purposely not learn anyone's name, and then go off cart numbers on the radio. And I got into officiating shortly after I was announcing, but I was doing play-by-play commentary first, so I knew everybody's name. So I'm on the radio going, "Yeah, Kugler into Gregg, turn 4," and the rest of the officials are going, "Hey, dude, don't say that. Don't
Right,
what about
right.
the one name you don't know? And what if somebody's listening, right? The odds of anyone else, listening to the radio communications, knowing by heart your guys' numbers versus your guys' names is a whole lot less. But yeah, Gary, I mean, did you, as the track owner, there's probably countless stories of stuff like that. Just like, you said, from a couple weeks ago of, you have we're racing, right? You have on track penalties. You have people that don't agree with the penalties. You have, people that maybe get fired up a little bit. And I feel like for someone like you, that's, probably been around the block a few times to see about every kind of scenario play out, what would be your advice to a track owner or series owner or official of, when they get in those situations when people, do get fired up about something like that?
Well, what I tell them, it's a penalty on the go-kart track or the racetrack is just like a foul in a basketball game. The player thinks he didn't do it, but he continues on, and unless he fouls out with maximum number of fouls. But and then they think of that and they think, well, maybe that's right. And just like the little gentleman that was disqualified 2 weeks ago, 3 of those family members that were racing against him, got his go-kart running and got the axle in and everything else on Saturday and Sunday morning, so he could race at the CKNA race. And I think you got to think of the family, and try to treat everybody fair, treat everybody the same. And I never heard that story about Randy and the no names. I didn't know that. I would enjoy that.
It taught me a lesson, and I ran after he said that, he says, that's what I thought, and he walked away. I ran him down. I said, whoa, hang on a second. I said, I looked at him. He goes, what? I said, you're right. I said, I'm telling you, you got to believe me. We're not playing favorites here, but it sure looks like we are, because I didn't know your name, and I apologize, and I will never do that again. And he and I were great friends ever since that time. But it taught me a lesson, man. And like you said, Xander, and you experienced it too, the perception. I don't think most any race director is going to do his best to be fair, but the perception is what is most important. And if you're perceived as someone that favors Gary but doesn't favor Xander, even though that's not true, that's what people are going to believe.
Oh yeah. No, there's so many bits, right? Even for us on commentary, right? It's a constant conversation I have with all of my young men and women and old, or at least older than me, that will have doing the live streaming and broadcasting, right? Because it's different than, even just a handful of years ago when you were only maybe on the PA or only maybe on a lesser viewed audio stream or video stream. But now we'll have a last lap clip or a moment, or even just the live feed itself getting tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of views. And even when you don't notice it, because like you said, right, like you weren't meaning to be biased at all, you just knew what you knew and didn't know what you didn't know. You didn't necessarily have a personal bias either way, but the perception's reality. And so I tell all my guys, and I kind of have this almost voice in my head of, I'm my own harshest critic, even just doing something totally unrelated to race directing and officiating, but going, hey, I better not talk about this guy too much. Okay, I talked about this guy for a lap. I better start to kind of nix that now and make sure I go back to the next guy. And then I'm looking down the leaderboard in the top 10 or top 15 or wherever we are, and making sure, I say those different names or have something to say about everybody a little bit evenly, because the last thing I want to do is to have someone watch that broadcast related to that driver, is that driver, or is, a fan of that driver, and go, man, that commentator gave, that person no love. And here they are just gushing over, everyone else around them, or one person in particular. And it would be something that I wouldn't even notice, and it's tough because, you go to the racetrack and like you said, Gary, it's a family friendly environment. You make friends with certain people, just because you're more like-minded, or just, same age or same personality. And it's easy as a, whether you're a promoter or in our case, the on-air talent, to gravitate to hang out towards them. And I constantly press myself and the rest of our team to go, hey, make sure that we go and say hi to everybody, even the people you haven't met. And I'm sure you could probably attest to that as a track owner too, that when you walk around at the OVK club events or at any club event that you see someone maybe you haven't met before, you're like, let me go say hi to them. Welcome to G&J Kartway, right?
Very true. Very true. Yes, you're right.
Yeah.
And that brings up an interesting question, Xander. What you were saying, Gary, you went many years with Jason and Travis racing at the club.
Right.
Did that ever put you in an awkward position? Did you find yourself? I know with my dad it was this way. Did you find yourself, if anything, leaning the other direction just to make sure people thought it was fair versus cutting them a break?
Well, in 1969 and 1971, I was still racing go-karts, but I did not race at any of the events at Camden, Ohio, to stay away from that. I did not race the national or in 1969 or 1971. And then two, a couple times when Jason got black flagged or he got penalized, you just smile and bear it because I wasn't going to protest it or anything like that. And it didn't happen very often, but once in a while it did. And like I say, you want to treat everybody fair, and I didn't want to have anybody think that the kids got any favoritism because their last name was Gregg.
And I never ever heard that from people racing at Camden, but Xander's explanation about behind the mic and how you have to be careful. I'm thinking, geez, you had two sons racing there for a number of years. I'm sure, as you stated, sometimes you had to look the other way, and like the black flag, you're thinking, wait a minute, he shouldn't. I better be quiet. I'll talk to him Monday.
Do you ever have to have that conversation as a dad to your sons of like explaining that, hey, I'm not going to protest when you get black flagged at Camden, or if you get, or you better drive cleaner than the average or the majority of the field because, you're my son, you're the track owner's son, right? Like we need to hold to a higher standard, or I'm sorry that it may not feel as fair for you as it might feel for everybody else, but this is, the downside to the privilege of being the son of the racetrack owner.
Yeah, those occasions do occur, and you tell Jason and Travis, drive fair, drive clean, but it doesn't always happen. Once in a while, like I said, you just have to grin and bear it.
Did they ever come to you one of those days when they got black flagged and go, Dad, what the heck? Like, come on, that wasn't fair. And what would be your response if they ever did?
Well, it happened one time at Portland. Jason was racing, and a Jason was running for the lead, and the Carter knocked him out, and he came back to like fifth or sixth. And then it was like a 15-lap race, so he got back up, and I just knew when he got back up there, he was going to knock that gentleman out, but he didn't. When he got back up there, he got around him and won the race. And I told Jason that was pretty good because I said I would have probably knocked him out. But Jason, I do remember the gentleman's name, and he passed him and won the race. And I told Jason that was pretty good. I'm very proud of him.
Yeah, that's the best way to get back at somebody is not to crash them, it's to beat them.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I know as we wind down here, one of the questions I wanted to ask you, and Xander and I are always interested in what the guest has to share, but when you get up in the morning and your feet hit the ground, what would you say is some things that have affected you and influenced your life from karting in your everyday life? And you run and Xander, along with the kart track, Gary runs a very successful trucking business, and he has a farm. Guy, I don't know how he somehow has found more than 24 hours in a day to do all that he does. I know he's got a great team and a great family around him. But how has karting influenced you, Gary, over the years in your everyday life?
Well, of course, when you're racing a go-kart or working on it, you learn to be somewhat of a mechanical. You have to work on that thing, and you learn some mechanical ability. Go-karting, it's fun to when you travel to other tracks, and of course the family is always in there. We always take the kids and everybody. Even we took Shelly and Travis, even though when Travis was young, he wasn't racing. And then go-karting teaches you a couple other things in life and go-karting and everything. You pay attention to detail because in reality, a go-kart, the same thing works on a go-kart that works on an Indy car, but it's just a lot smaller. I mean, you may put 3 or 4 pounds, or may put 1 degree in it, where the Indy car goes 3 degrees.
and they might add 20 pounds, on the left front or right front, whatever. And it teaches you, life is not easy, but you just have to, like I said, pay attention to detail and keep on going. And you always learn to rely on your family. And I've got a great family.
Oh, you do. You do. And that picture, there's a picture on Facebook, Xander, after Travis won that race, after he'd been out of the car for 20 years. Travis and the family are on the podium having their picture taken on that day. And I thought, man, that epitomizes karting and family better than anything I can think of. That was awesome. Yeah. What about, I don't know, was it 2 years ago, 3 years ago, Gary, I came down with that stone.
Yes. The George Kugler stone is still here. Yes.
Yeah. So just a quick story, Xander. At Charlotte Motor Speedway, when my dad passed away, they created a stone, probably a couple feet long and about a foot in height, but it lays flat on the ground. And they planted a tree at Charlotte Motor Speedway, and it's a WK founder, George Kugler, when he passed away. So, I guess 25 years later, maybe, I go down there for something at one of the WK races, and I'm going to go look for the stone. Well, the stone was all covered up in weeds. The tree was gone. I thought, this is no good. So I thought, what should I do with this? So I got a hold of the Speedway, and I says, I want that stone. They says, you know what, we'll get it out. You can have it. So I got it, and I called Gary. And there was a vintage race coming up in about a month. I said, Gary, I got this stone, and it deserves to be at Camden. Gary says, I totally agree. So I came down there. We had a little ceremony, and they put the stone, they laid it ground level, right, I think, adjacent to the grid by the podium. That means the world to me, Gary. I really appreciate you doing that.
Yes, and Shelly does mow that every day. I mean, every week, and no weeds are growing on top of it. Yes, you're right.
Yeah. No, I listen. It's where it needs to be. I knew it had a good home for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have any George Kugler stories yourself, Gary, that come to mind? To me, that's such a cool part of getting to go down memory lane, right? Is get to talk about people and hear maybe even new stories maybe Randy hasn't heard the perspective of. So is there a story about George that maybe Randy might not know or might not have heard your side telling it?
Well, not really. I told him I remember buying Crescent carburetor parts from his mother in the early 60s, probably 64, 65, or 66, when they raced down here. She sold the Crescent carburetor parts from Tillotson, and I do remember that. And and George was one that promoted the thing, be fair to everybody. And that was one thing that he always told. And he told me that several times, if it's good for one, it's good for everybody.
One of the things too, I remember is we had some races at Eaton at the fairgrounds. Were you involved with that track?
Well, I wasn't really involved with it, but I liked to race up there because I didn't have to worry about anything on the track or the concession stand up there because the Preble County Kart Track Club took care of that. And we had
that wasn't OVKA. That wasn't OVKA. That was not OVKA.
Yeah, OVK did run that too. Also, okay. Yes.
So it's like 10 minutes from the Camden. They actually built in the infield of the fairgrounds. They built a go-kart track that ran for a few years, and then they shut it down, I guess.
Well, they took the front straightaway out and made a wider pulling track there for the tractor pulls, and that kind of eliminated the go-kart track. And then,
I mean, that probably makes it where, like Randy was mentioning earlier about some of the newer, venues that pop up around you. MCC is still further down the road than 10 minutes. Newcastle, the same, right? I mean, you mentioned at the beginning, there were 7 tracks all within a pretty short, driving distance, even in that time. And then in the modern era, you haven't been around for so long and doing everything you're doing. I mean, was there ever any moment where you were worried about, I wouldn't say competition, but just, diluting the pie?
Well, what I always say, competition makes the world go round.
Mhm.
And, just like in the trucking business, you got to be competitive, but you got to have, you got to keep on going and, wake up every day and go to work.
Yeah, yeah, something to push you. So, yeah, as a closing thought, Gary, for anyone that, for one, obviously to come out and check out G&J, but if you had any specific, couple minutes of wisdom, or even just a one liner to pass along from everything that you've learned and experienced from being involved with karting for so much of your life, how would you like to close out for someone listening in?
Well, I would say be sure keep it family friendly and fair to everyone. Try to do that.
That's good.
Does it get any better than that?
Well, thank you so much, Gary, for joining us and making the time. And separately for the viewers listening along, I did push this one back, so that's why we're only an hour with Gary, because I was sleepy this morning. So that's 100% on me. I got to be a little better about that. But no, thank you, Gary, so much. This has been great.
Thank you both. Thank you very much.
Gary, this meant the world to me. It did.
Maybe I'll see you this weekend at the Vintage Kart Show.
I can't make it. I wanted to come down. I'm going to try to get maybe to a club race or something. I've got a birthday party Friday night I can't get out of, and I got to go. So
Yeah,
and I don't mean that in a bad way. It's I'm going to attend the party. It's a close friend of mine, but it just popped up. Otherwise, I would be there Friday.
it's all right,
Sorry,
Gary.
man.
I'm starting to think that Randy only exists on my screen now. He showed up at a track 2 weeks after I did, and I don't see him either. So, we're one and the same there.
This is all was it AI? Is that what they call it now?
Yeah.
This is all AI. Yeah.
Anyway, thank you, Gary.